I came to Boston in 1972. I was a freshman at Tufts, and they have this beautiful library. And when you stand on the library roof, you see the Boston skyline in the distance. And I went there and I stood on that roof and I looked at that skyline, and that was how I picked where I was going to go to school. I said, oh my gosh, I could actually see this view for the next 4 years. I'm done.
There's this marvelous notion that was advanced by Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the famous senator, politician, Harvard professor, who said, if you want a world-class city, start world-class universities and wait 200 years. Well, we benefit enormously from the fact that we have institutions that actually have more than 200 years of heritage that have laid the foundation for what is an amazing education ecosystem here in Boston.
I'm just so proud that we're based in Boston. I think it's a wonderful place. But for our students, a third of them end up in Boston, a third of them go to elsewhere in the United States, a third of them go around the world.
Just because somebody goes to school here doesn't mean that we have the right to keep them here. And I think we have to, as a community and as an ecosystem, have to give them the opportunities and the reasons to stay. So, you hear so much about this brain drain of, oh, well, they were at Harvard or they were at MIT and then they went here or they went there. And it's like, yeah, but that's where they started from. Just because somebody comes here and goes to school means that they're going to stay here, build a company here, and become part of the social fabric. I think that's up to us.
As we go to a flat world, the economy is driven by products and people that can think on a global scale. So our ability to have a global perspective and not be parochial is critically important.
We need to be, and we are attempting to be, a vibrant member in this community, a node in an entrepreneurship network, if you will. And that kind of network is a positive thing.
The cost of education is rising exorbitantly, and the value of that education in terms of the outcomes that it can deliver to you is not that clear. As the cost of education increases and as students and educational providers are looking to prove their value, it's really important for them to be able to focus on the actual outcome that a student was able to achieve based on their educational experience.
When I talk about the folks who are out there celebrating the $10,000 online degree, and we're going to compare that to the $200,000 to $250,000 face-to-face tuition-dependent charge, who's asking the question of how are you 25 times better than the alternative? The reality is we have a portfolio of great institutions in this marketplace who happen to be tuition dependent. If they're unable to answer that question about how they add value to their constituencies, they're not going to survive.
Yeah, at MIT, it's about the numbers. It's not about stories, it's about numbers. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is not enough. In some situations that is, but I think that's why MIT's time has come more, is because it really is about results.
When you think about the value of university education, I think it's imperative that universities constantly examine themselves and say, to what extent are we delivering a quality product? It's a real issue, and I think a lot of universities need to really be self-examining the kind of value they're delivering.
People who previously were paying exorbitant rates for educational experiences now have essentially alternatives being given to them.
Skills are important, and I think we all can be attracted to certain skill-based learning. But I think the value, and certainly Harvard feels the core of what contribution they're making to the educational journey of individuals, is that appreciation and understanding of how to learn, how to teach yourself, and then maybe go, and that may be deployed through skill-based learning you do throughout your life, whether that be at Harvard or somewhere else.
It is hard to figure out how technology can profoundly replicate the power of the 168-hour residentially based experience. At the other end, for people who actually are simply engaged in education for a credential and a job, we're already pretty close to a significant incremental change in both program delivery as well as the shift of where the students are going.
The most important skill that large companies need today is agility. The pace of change in business is faster than it's ever been. What that means is that they need a workforce that is capable of dealing with change, that is constantly investing in educational experiences and learning more about what's happening around them and continually staying up to date. And they also need senior leadership that's open to a more entrepreneurial way of doing business.
There is and remains, despite all of the literature that surrounds it, still a cavernous gap between the desires and expectations of employers and what we're producing at the institutional level.
You know, we should be having classes on, internet marketing. We should be having, all sorts of things on, kind of how the web has kind of changed engagement and what engagement means. Academia's got to evolve, just like the rest of society's evolved. And it's like, oh, well, our curriculum has worked, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like, yeah, but we do need to kind of suit graduates with a different set of tools for the innovation economy.
The process of building curricula, if you're a traditional educational institution, is time-consuming, cumbersome, and very difficult. Meanwhile, if you look at the pace of change in technology, it is rapid, fluid, and continues to evolve. And so what that means is that there needs to be a completely different way for educational institutions to think about the actual curricula that they create.
I have lots of undergraduates that I had in my employment at Babson College who desperately wanted to learn how to do apps. So do I actually go through a curriculum process? Do I design a course? Do I worry about the long-term sustainability of that education? What we did at Babson was really very simple. We actually had an undergraduate who was really good at it, who was excited about teaching, and created a peer-led course that actually got enrollment of faculty and staff and students from day one. The rise of institutions like General Assembly are completely devoted to being able to provide a much higher powerful, much more relevant, and much more direct access to much of this learning than can be provided in traditional educational institutions.
In the new economy, education needs to be a much more integral part of your entire life, not just the beginning of it. There is an incredible foundational role that traditional academic institutions play in shaping your character, informing you of core educational principles. But as you progress in your career, it's important to continually refresh what you learn.
By the year 2019, 50% of all education will be delivered online, of all kinds, at all levels. And so the question isn't whether or not technology is doing it, the question is how we keep up with the pace.
Having worked in startups, that's the nature of a startup. If you don't innovate, you die. One of the challenges of working at places like MIT, Harvard, Babson, the hundreds of universities around here is they already exist. And innovation within an existing organization is always more difficult.
One of the big developments in education recently has been the idea of, and the product of a MOOC, or massively open online courses. And what that means is that large educational institutions and small ones, as well as individual professors and educators, are now able to, through many different media, place their educational content onto very accessible platforms. And you're finding numbers like 100,000, 200,000 people signing up for these courses.
The vast majority of people neither have the time nor the financial resources to be able to find themselves over a 4 to 6 year time frame. And for people who are looking for access to content, access to support, and ultimately a credential which is valued in the marketplace, online or blended learning provides a very, very compelling proposition already today.
Well, I think MOOCs, I think online learning, I think they are filled with opportunity and promise, and at the same time, I think it's really not clear to date what the final product's going to look like.
MOOCs fill certainly an impressive role here, that they can bring high-quality lectures, because the idea of someone standing there and lecturing to you it is kind of a strange concept, because you can see that now on YouTube or someplace else. And why would I stand there when I could get, the Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, Don Sadoway, teaching the class that is oversubscribed? MOOCs have a very clear value proposition in some senses. That doesn't mean that the residential four-year college, it goes away. It just means we have to think about it differently in the future.
It's yet to be clear that you're ever going to be able to replace physical interaction. And I can tell you in running the Harvard Innovation Lab, physical space and presence and proximity matter. I think I have a tough time imagining entrepreneurship and, more importantly, the actual working on your entrepreneurial venture if you're a student by having your team spread out virtually. I see every day in our facilities what I call spontaneous interaction breakout around our kitchen. And I can't think about how we'd replicate that. I can't think about how that would happen online.
If you look at some of the stuff that's happening around hybrid learning, where you take the best of what the internet has to offer, which is the ability to distribute content and educational content in a vastly more accessible way, and you combine that with the educational institution's ability to create in-person experiences, study groups, time with gifted professors, and you combine both of those, you're able to now have a much more productive time actually spent in the classroom, actually spent in learning experiences.
What is being delivered online is probably not as good as what's being delivered face-to-face in traditional institutions. It's just a matter of time before it's actually just as good, if not better, and eons of magnitudes cheaper.
There's many ways that educational institutions, traditional and new, can work together. We don't win this if we continually compete too much. Both sides need to be able to share their experience, their knowledge, what they're hearing from students, and learn from it together.
We need a robust ecosystem of not-for-profits and for-profits. We need access to capital in a variety of different ways. We need institutions that have 6-month timeframes, 1-year timeframes, and 200-year timeframes. Largely not-for-profit educational institutions provide a robust platform for the for-profits to play, and the for-profits are playing in interesting spaces that are likely to reshape educational institutions. The world needs both.
Boston is not a city in Massachusetts. It's not a city in New England. It's not a city even in the United States. We think of Boston as being part of the global entrepreneurial ecosystem. What always gets in the way of progress is arrogance. And I think that Boston now is embracing the fact that we can't look back. We've got to look forward. We have to continue to push the innovation frontier. And if we sit back and say, we're MIT, we're great, we're Harvard, we're great, we're Babson, we're great, that's not going to work.
I think universities, Harvard University being one example, their willingness to be thinking themselves about how they change, I think, and given that universities are often places where new ideas are born, nurtured, grown, validated, and brought out into an open marketplace, can be really synergistic and symbiotic to a city like Boston, as Boston continues to work to be a center of knowledge, a center of industry, a center of trade.
As we look to the future, students will have better outcomes, more meaningful educational experiences, and will be better empowered to pursue work they love. And I think that there is a general mindset in Boston of the importance of innovation and experimentation in education that will continue to keep Boston on top when it comes to educational experience and delivery.
There's no question as I look out into the future that there's an aspirational opportunity for the Boston educational ecosystem to align itself in all sorts of ways to be the hub of innovation that actually dramatically has the capacity to bring down cost and improve quality in a significant way that not only helps shape the nature of these institutions in Boston, but actually changes education for the world.